Bob Spearing is our speaker today. I am really excited to have Bob here today. Bob is presenting on Is Our Time Being Manipulated? So, Bob has had numerous articles published in various UFO related magazines around the world in several languages, including 3 MUFON journal cover stories. He's appeared in the Travel Channel television series UFOs The Lost Evidence as a photo analyst and an Ancient Aliens episode about MUFON in February 2023. He also writes articles for the MUFON newsletter at MUFON.com and speaks at UFO US conventions. So, as great as that sounds, I still feel like it's a little bit humble because I feel like Bob's even kind of selling himself short a little bit because so he's the director of investigations, and as I mentioned earlier, there's the director of investigations for the United States, but he's the international director. So everything that's not in the United States, that's under his purview. So that's a lot of countries, that's a lot of people, it's a huge geographical area, and he's covering, he's covering cases with investigators from with different languages and different time zones and communication, when it's just going to be a monstrous task. So he's got all that, and then every month he also hosts our state director meeting, and usually that's or not usually. Sometimes it's only open to the state directors, so for the 50 states, but many times we have assistant directors on there and chief investigators. So it's a huge video conference call. So there's a lot of us on there, and so Bob's updating all of us. He's answering questions. I have to imagine he feels blindsided sometimes by some of the questions he gets, but he is so professional. He is so polite. He handles it all so well. He does a great job of managing this huge crew of people. So on the one hand, he's got the international investigations, which is most of the world. Then he's got all the directors, which is the United States. He's like MUFON's Atlas. He holds up the whole MUFON world. He's like the God Atlas holding up the whole MUFON world. So he does a fantastic job with working with all the state directors and international investigations. He helps with, people can send requests if they're having problems with MUFON University. He just does a wonderful job on this. I'm so excited to have him here. I'm really looking forward to hearing his presentation. So I want you to, everyone, give a big Minnesota MUFON welcome to Mr. Bob Spearing. Take it away, Bob.
Okay, so I've been in MUFON for 14 years, pretty much. I've been interested in UFOs since I was a little kid in 1965. We had the Great Northeastern Blackout from Quebec down to Virginia, and I was 6 years old. My uncle came running over the next day saying they think that there were UFOs over the Clay Power Station in Niagara Falls. And I started buying the Gold Key UFO comic books, Saga magazine in the 1970s when I was in 5th grade. I bought Chariots of the Gods when it came out. And I had 3 rather unspectacular UFO experiences in my life. I was never abducted or anything like that, but I definitely saw technological craft in the sky that I could not understand what it was that I was looking at. So I joined MUFON in 2013. I was a New Jersey field investigator, and I just worked my way up to where we are now. I think that the UFO phenomenon is numerous things. It could be aliens, could be time travelers, interdimensionals. A lot of it is, secret U.S. Craft, misidentified natural phenomena. So I believe that ufology is an umbrella of different possibilities. Okay. What I'm going to talk about today is sort of similar to someone was talking about Dr. Michael Masters before on the break. Dr. Michael Masters believes that there are time travelers, human time travelers that may be manipulating our timeline. And that's also something that I've been interested in for a very long time. And I've been documenting cases from numerous books that I study, Wonders in the Sky by Jacques Vallée and Chris Aubeck, the Humanoid Encounter series by Albert Rosales, 15 books that take you through all of human history. And I'm a patterns guy. So what I do is I look to see if I can find the same thing happening over and over again. Because in a way, circumstantial evidence is enough to convict somebody in a court of law. And I think I have overwhelming circumstantial evidence that more than one party may be trying to influence human history. I may be right, I may be wrong. These are my theories, and I've just put it into a PowerPoint presentation this past month. So when I'm done, let me know what you think. I'm going to try to share my screen now. Take you through 3,500 years of history, beginning with the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III in 1500 BC. All right, there's a somewhat dubious, now lost parchment that was written in a sort of hieroglyphic slang that was purchased by an employee of the Vatican in the 1930s. And it basically tells the story of fire circles coming over Egypt, over Pharaoh's house, one at first, more after that, to the point where they become brighter than the sun. And the Pharaoh, they make, offerings and stuff to these fire circles that seem to be observing ancient Egypt. And at one point, uh, birds and fish and water and rocks and stones fall out of the sky on the Egyptians. And one wonders if these were technological objects. Were they taking on water for sustenance or to cool their engines or whatever, and then basically flushing their toilet bowl down on the Egyptians because they didn't particularly hold them in high regard? But the problem is the papyrus was lost. It was allegedly looked at and translated by three different Egyptologists back in the 1930s. When Tully died, it was not found among his belongings, and his brother, who was a Monsignor at the Vatican Library, said that the Vatican Library didn't have the parchment either. What's interesting about Pharaoh Thutmose is that there's a possibility, and I'm going to give you two possibilities with pharaohs today, that he may have been the pharaoh that met Moses concerning the 10 plagues. Okay, for decades, people have thought it was Ramses, but there's evidence that there's two possible birth dates about 100, 150 years apart from Moses. If one of those birth dates is correct, then Thutmose would be the pharaoh that Moses encountered. Now, because the papyrus was lost, we don't know if it's a forgery or not. There's people in the Fortean community today that believe that it may be a forgery. But this is basically what the text of that now lost parchment said. In the year 22 of the third month of winter, sixth hour of the day, it was found that a strange fiery disk was coming in the sky. It had no head. The breath of its mouth emitted a foul odor, and we know sometimes UFOs give off a sulfuric odor. Its body was 1 rod in length and 1 rod in width. It had no voice. It came towards His Majesty's house. After several days had passed, they became more numerous in the sky than ever. They shined in the sky more than the brightness of the sun and extended to the limits of the four supports of heaven. Powerful was their position of the fiery discs. It was after the evening meal when the discs ascended even higher in the sky to the south. Fish and a variety of birds, some translations say volatiles, which would mean things besides birds, but rained down from the sky, a marvel never before known since the foundation of the country. Now, this next story I'm going to tell you is literally written in stone about Thutmose III. It's from the Jebel Barkal Stela, also called the Victory Stela. And it tells of an encounter that Thutmose had with a rebellious Nubian army coming up from the south to try to take down Thutmose. Now, what's interesting about Thutmose is that in ancient Egypt, he was the most prolific and successful military pharaoh ancient Egypt ever had. He won over 40 encounters and never lost a battle. This is a good indication that Thutmose probably thought very highly of himself. So at this particular battle, something very, very bizarre happens. As the two armies meet on the battlefield, a bright white star, and the name of the story on this tablet is called The Miracle of the Star. A bright white star comes down and smashes into the Nubian army and absolutely decimates them without touching Thutmose's army at all. And so the Egyptians thought that this was the gods acknowledging that Thutmose was, an earthly god. And it's very, very interesting that a meteorite, if that's what it was, just happened to coincidentally take out one army and leave the other army standing untouched on the battlefield. So was there some sort of technological interference that saved the day for Thutmose? So let's suppose, for example, that Thutmose was killed that day. There may not have been a biblical encounter between he and Moses, And it's very interesting that if he was so full of himself as the great military leader, it would suggest that that is why he gave Moses such a hard time letting his people go. The Bible says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and that would make Thutmose an excellent candidate for the Pharaoh that actually went toe to toe with Moses. And because of this, all of human history took a certain direction. So while we can't prove that the Tully Papyrus actually existed, we know that Thutmose was involved with some rather strange sky happenings. We move on 150 years or so later. We come to Pharaoh Amenophis IV, who changes his name to Akhenaten. All right. And he was a rather odd looking fellow. He had feminine features. He had a very elongated head. Think of those mummies in South America. They think he had some sort of gender dysphoria, possibly. But anyway, he was considered a heretic uh, as far as the Egyptians later on. And a lot of his inscriptions and his names were erased from temples that he created. The story is that he, instead of worshiping the traditional gods of ancient Egypt, the beetles, the cows, the frogs, he worshiped the sun god, the one god in the sky. And this is the other possibility that if Moses was born at a later date, that this may have been the Pharaoh that Moses came in contact with, and that maybe Akhenaten's belief in one God may have been what influenced the ancient Israelites. So, how did Akhenaten think that he was the son of the sun god Aten? How did this come about? Well, there's yet another stela, the frontier stela, that was discovered in the 1920s. And it tells of the story of the pharaoh walking along the Nile, and he sees a shining disc descend from the sky, and the disc speaks to him, and it tells him to change his name to Akhenaten, and told him to build a new capital and name it after himself, which he does. And so, for the rest of his reign, the ancient Egyptians were forced to worship one invisible god in the sky. And if this was the fellow that went toe to toe with Moses, it would explain where some of the ancient Israelites may have gotten their belief in one God. Anyway, after he dies, they revert back to beetles and frogs and cows, and they wipe his name from the record. Moving on through history, we come to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had one of the largest empires the world had ever known, probably up until the British Empire in the 19th century. He died in 323 BC. His empire stretched from Macedonia all the way to India. But he died mysteriously at 33 without an heir. He didn't have a son. So when he died, his four generals split up his empire into four pieces. Okay, so the one general, Antiochus the Fourth, the Antiochus the First, takes over what is now Israel, and Antiochus the Fourth, also called Antiochus the Madman, and he's a fascinating character. If you're into history, you should look him up. He did some really weird things. Um, he is the emperor that goes into the second temple in Jerusalem and defiles it with a pig offering. But this, of course, sets the Jews off greatly, and the revolt of the Maccabees start. Now, Judas Maccabee was a very famous, him and his brothers were very famous military leaders in ancient Israel. And because of this defiling of the pig in the temple, the Jews revolt against Antiochus. And famously, at the end of the revolt in 164 BC, and this story will sound familiar to you because it happens about 190 something years later again, Judas Maccabee rides into Jerusalem on a white horse, and the people are laying palms down in front of him. And so when Jesus did this, probably 190 years later or so, and the Romans were again in control of Israel, they knew darn well that this was going to be a repeat of Judas Maccabees, and that's primarily the reason they took Jesus out. Um, Triumphant on a white horse means military victory. Riding into Jerusalem, if a Israelite king rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, it was a symbol of king of peace. For those of you who know that. But here's where the story gets weird. Did the Maccabees have some sort of technological help? In the last two books of the Old Testament in the Catholic Bible, not the Protestant Bible, because Martin Luther took some books out, the second Maccabees, the last book of the Catholic Bible, chapter 5 takes place about 167 BC when Antiochus was at war with Egypt, but still in control of Israel at that time. They see this ongoing 40-day apparition in the sky. Basically, this is how the chapter opens up. And then it happened that through all of the city for the space of almost 40 days, there were seen horsemen running in the air in cloth of gold and armed with lances like a band of soldiers, and troops of horsemen in array encountering and running one against each other with shaking of shields and multitude of pikes and drawing of swords and casting of darts and glittering of golden ornaments and harness of all sorts. And they think that this is a good omen, and apparently it was, because the revolt is successful. But if we look at these horsemen in the sky in gold, arrayed in gold, shooting darts at each other, we could possibly interpret this as looking at modern day aircraft in some way, shape, or form, battling each other. One side possibly trying to help the Maccabees, the other side trying to thwart the Maccabees, but the side with the Maccabees wins the day for them. Okay, I thought that maybe, like, we get all through history a lot of accounts of ships in the sky, and some of it may be what are called Fata Morgana or superior mirages. If you guys remember, a couple of years ago, there was a very famous photograph taken of an oil tanker that looked like it was up in the sky and not in the water. That's called a superior mirage or a Fata Morgana. They usually happen in about 23 degrees up in the sky, which is a good way to measure it. You see something like that. So I did some research to see what was going on in 167 BC in the Mediterranean, and there were no extended battles at all. There was one minor skirmish, and nothing else that would have lasted 40 days. So I have to rule out superior mirage. And I'll show you this for those of you who aren't sure how a superior mirage goes, where the observer's looking at it. If the atmosphere has layers of hot and cold, okay, it will actually work like a mirror and show a boat up in the sky. But I was able to rule this out. If we go back a couple of years at the MUFON Symposium Cases of Interest presentation, one of our photo analysts analyzed a video of what looked like a silver spinning disc over Tijuana, Mexico. And he's an astrophotographer. His name is Greg Cisco. He's a state section director in Illinois, part of our photo analysis team. And what he did was he took the video apart frame by frame and used astronomy software that's usually used to enhance the clarity of a planet that's photographed. And he stacks the video images on top of each other. And when we stacked the images, what we realized was that what we were looking at was a cruise ship on its way to a port just south of Tijuana. So this was the final stacking version of it, and it's clear to me anyway that it's a cruise ship, and it was only about 30 miles north of the port that it was going to, and it was a superior mirage. Now, as we move through time, 73 BC, the Romans were fighting what is now the modern day country of Turkey. It was called the Pontian Empire. and a very, very, very unusual thing happens. Now, remember at this time, the Maccabees are in control of Israel. Okay. Rome is getting their butts kicked. Okay. The Pontians are doing a job on them. And they go to meet for battle one day. And again, like with Thutmose III, when the Nubian army is wiped out by a white star or meteorite, same thing happens again. Only this time it doesn't wipe out either army. It comes down, bang, right in between them, and it looks like a hog's head in the historical account. It scares both armies so bad they run away. Okay, so they've been going at it. They've been hurling insults at each other. I mean, these are big armies. All right, but then the sky splits open, and what they describe as a silver hot meteorite fell between the two armies, shaped like a hog's head. It scares them, and the battle never goes off. Both armies regroup, and now they come back, and this time the tide has turned in favor of the Romans. I don't know if you remember the Super Bowl several years ago where the lights went out at the stadium and San Francisco was winning, and then 20 minutes later, when the lights come back on, they end up losing the game because they had lost the mojo, they lost the momentum. So now the Romans start kicking butts on the Parthians, and the rest is history. The Romans come down through Turkey down into what is now modern Lebanon and Israel and take over Israel. This sets the whole stage for the biblical account of Jesus Christ. And we all know what happens there. So, was there some sort of technological interference here again to ensure that the Romans would gain control of ancient Israel to set up a certain string of events? It's almost as if someone knows the end of history, and one team is trying to come back to change it, and one team is coming back to try to protect it. 66 AD, some weird stuff starts happening in Jerusalem around the temple. Okay, people start seeing armies in the sky again. And one of Jesus's predictions was that at the end of the world, that there would be these battles in the sky. However, it does not herald the return of Christ the way Christ was talking in the Bible. There was no return of Christ at this time. So between 66 and 69 AD, the year before uh, the temple is destroyed by the Romans, all sorts of strange stuff starts happening at the temple. Josephus Flavius was a Jewish historian that was under contract to the Romans to write Jewish history for them. And he starts writing these strange tales about lights appearing over the temple and then disappearing. The tall, heavy doors of the temple opening and closing that would normally, by themselves, that would normally take four men to open and close them. The heifer gives birth to a lamb, which to the Jews was a sign of, the imminent return of the Savior. And then they hear a loud bang in the temple, and they hear a voice that says, "Let us go hence." Now remember, this is 30 something years after Jesus dies. But in the Gospel of John, 30 years before, Jesus says the exact same thing, "Let us go hence." And if you look at the paragraph before that sentence and after that sentence, it doesn't fit in with the rest of the chapter. It's sort of a standalone. So it's very interesting that that line pops up 30 something years later with all of these goings on at the temple. But the weirdest thing is that on this one particular night before sunset, again, we see chariots and troops of soldiers in their armor running about through the clouds and the surrounding cities. Even Tacitus, a Roman historian, mentions this scene in the sky. So again, are we dealing with two technological forces, one trying to save the temple, the second temple, and one trying to ensure that the Romans destroy it in 70 AD and that the Jews are expelled from Israel for 2,000 years? Also that year, Halley's Comet made an appearance in the sky, and people were superstitious back in the day, and they may have just simply been describing Halley's Comet. 312 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine sees a cross in the sky. And now at this point, Constantine's a pagan, all right, and he's the emperor of Rome, the Roman Empire. There's a lot of problems going on, all right. He's got a lot of internal dissension, and he sees this cross in the sky, this glowing cross in the sky, and around the head of it, he sees an inscription, "In hoc signo vinces," which means "in this sign conquer." He takes this as a sign from God. Other people see it also, so it was a real sky phenomenon. And I can tell you that crosses have been seen all through human history, and sometimes you have to wonder if it was really a cross or if it might have been some sort of fixed wing aircraft. Anyway, he wins the battle and he unites the empire again, and he is so profoundly impacted by this sighting in the sky that he makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire after 300 years of persecution. So we see a sea change, all right, in the thinking of the Roman Empire, which has suddenly become Christian. Now, this is a very, very interesting story. This is one of my favorites. All right. In the Quran, there's a story. A story is like a set of verses, almost like a poem that tells a story, the year of the elephant. And essentially, the story is this: the king of Yemen had converted to Christianity, and the king of Yemen had the most sophisticated and largest army in the Middle East at that time. He had elephants, you name it. And he contacts the pagans, because Mecca is still pagan at this point, and tells them, if you don't convert to Christianity, I'm going to level Mecca and I'm going to take out the Kaaba. The Kaaba is that black tent that when the Muslims go to the Hajj, they walk around it, around it, around it. And inside that tent is the stone of God, which is most likely, people believe, a meteorite that they walk around the Kaaba. So the Meccans tell the king of Yemen, take a hike. We're not going to convert to Christianity. We like being animists. So he marches on Mecca, and this really bizarre thing happens. All of these black birds with stones in their mouths, pebbles, come flying down on the Yemeni army, drop the pebbles, and wipe out the entire Yemeni army. Was so bad that in later Islamic commentaries, it says that the skin of the soldiers fell off their bodies. Now, if you step back and look at this with technological modern day eyes, were they black birds with pebbles in their mouths? Was it a miracle? Or could it have been modern fighter jets dropping cluster bombs, radioactive cluster bombs, to be sure, to ensure that the Yemeni army is destroyed? Why is this important? Because if we're dealing with teams, people trying to destroy Jewish temples, people trying to bring Christianity into focus, something really interesting here happens that favors the Muslims. And that is the leader of the ragtag bunch of Meccans that defeats the Yemenis was Muhammad's grandfather. And had the Yemenis flattened Mecca, Muhammad never would have been born later that same year. So was there technological interference to ensure that the Prophet of Islam would be born? Okay. The bottom left is an actual old inscription uh, of what happened that day. And the right is my interpretation of the fighter jets. We move ahead to 1347 or so AD. The Black Plague is raging across Europe. 30 to 60% of the European population will die. One of the things that's interesting to me was, could it possibly have been an intentional genocide? Okay, because something very, very interesting happens in the 3 years between 1347 and 1350 AD. A writer by the name of Gianfranco Esposti tells of reports of strange cigar-shaped objects slowly crossing the sky, sometimes at low altitude, dispersing in their passage a disturbing mist. That's quote unquote. Okay. The question is, what were these black cylinders flying slowly over population areas, spraying mists at the same time that uh, hundreds of thousands of people were dying from an incurable plague? Was it intentionally germ warfare? February 1st, 1554, Salon de Provence, France. This is a sighting that was actually seen by Nostradamus, and he reports on it, and thousands of other witnesses see the same thing. They see what looks like a spear in the sky with fire coming out from behind it, and it races around the town and other nearby locations for about 2 hours. And this is a quote. It raced overhead very fast like an arrow, with great roaring like a mighty wind. Are we talking about fighter jet engines and exhaust? If you look at the picture from this newspaper from the time, look to the right side and look at the spear. All right. If you look at it with 21st century eyes, you can conceivably say, hey, this is, a swept back wing aircraft. It uses lift. Um, and so it would only be the type of thing that would fly in an atmosphere like Earth's. So my theory is that this is not aliens. This did not come from another solar system, got tugged along, and then they just started using it here. More than likely, I believe that this was a manufactured flying machine from the future. All right. I don't know what was going on in 1554, but it's certainly apparent to me, and hopefully to you, that as we go through the next several reports, that there were fighter jets in our skies 500 years before fighter jets were ever invented. This is the most famous Middle Ages UFO sighting of all, Nuremberg, April 14th, 1561. All right. And we're going to go back and forth on some of these slides a little bit because there's so much that people don't talk about that they don't realize. There's a lot going on here. If you look at the cylinders here, there's two types. Some have portholes and they're rejecting globe-like objects that could be some sort of drone. And then there are cylinders with no portholes. Look up the upper right-hand corner, the cylinders that seem to have hatches that release similar types of forms. So if you think in terms of, well, an American F-35 fighter jet going against a Russian MiG-29, they're both fighter jets, but there are incredible differences between them. So are we seeing a war between two factions that are pretty much close in space and time going at it? Look at the crosses. Could they be helicopters, or could the helicopter blades, as seen from the ground with the spinning effect that makes it look like a cross? Are we looking at airplanes fighting each other? All right. People try to say, skeptics try to say that it was just a natural weather phenomenon, mock suns or sun dogs. Interestingly enough, I mentioned before about superior mirages being at 23 degrees up in the sky. The mock suns are actually at 23 degrees away from the real sun. All right. It's a similar phenomenon. So again, I don't think this is a weather phenomenon. And the most important reason why would be if you look down to the lower right-hand corner, you see this billowing smoke. And I'll show you what that is in a couple of minutes. This is the text from the newspaper article associated with that woodcut by Hans Glaser, and it tells about the sun takes on a strange color, and also there are sort of arcs. If you look behind the sun, there's sort of arcs like rainbows, reddish rainbows. All right, and one of my theories is that these sun discolorations and these strange rainbows, which we see in a lot of UFO reports throughout history, may be an example of a portal opening up, allowing these objects to come through to battle in this particular time frame in history. I've come across 4 different types of portals in my research. There are strange rainbows with discoloration of the sun. There are white rectangles opening in the sky, black voids opening in the sky, and strange black clouds that objects come out of. Okay. And I'm going to put a whole presentation together on sky portals at some point because I have tons. But look at this print. I contacted the Zurich City Library in Switzerland because they house this woodcut. All right. It's actually not very big. It's only about this big. All right. Um, and when they sent me it, they sent me more than I thought I was going to get. And if you look at this particular woodcut print, it looks like there's the cutout of a bunny rabbit in the middle of it, right above the sun. And I asked her what that was, and she said that they believe that there was testing done at some point, and they removed a piece of the parchment. But what she told me that I didn't know, and I don't think anybody here knows, is that there's more than one version of this woodcut. All right. Look at the black spear. I want you to concentrate on the black spear. It's a perfectly black spear. And she told me that there are 4 versions of this woodcut. The library has 2, and she sent me them. And the other 2 are in private collections. And she didn't know where those private collections were, but I believe I found the 3rd one on the internet. So let's look at the black spear here. Oh, okay. So if you look closely here at the smoke, you can see that one of the cylinders has crashed. Okay. And that's what's billowing the smoke. And it seems that the orbs or the drones, whatever they are attempting some sort of rescue mission, or they've been displaced and are falling to the ground. Now, this is what I'm getting to. Look at the black spear, perfectly black spear. Look at this version. Okay. There's cuts in the spear. And I asked 2 fighter jet pilots what they thought about this, because the newspaper account says that this object was flying from east to west at a slow rate of speed. And they said to me, they go, it looks like a fighter jet with its landing flaps down coming in for a landing. And what's interesting is that right after Nuremberg, to the west of Nuremberg, there's a mountain range. And in that mountain range, it's very famous for stories about fairies and elves and odd creatures living inside the mountain. And it makes me wonder if those fairies and elves and creatures living inside that mountain was actually the United States military air base. And just like at Mount Shasta, these fighter jets were coming in for landing inside the mountain. And the Middle Ages folk don't understand what a United States aircraft is, and thus the myths about fairies, elves, and goblins. Now, this is from the 3rd version of it. And if you look very closely at the back of the left wing, you'll see a protrusion. And if we go back, you'll see that it's definitely not in this version, and it's definitely not in this version. And we did a photo analysis of it. This was not grafted in. This is the same texture. There's no break. This wasn't added later. This is a 3rd version of what I believe is a fighter jet. So the question is, what is it? All right. And I put out on Facebook to a couple of UFO groups a couple of years ago, what do you think that is? And everybody came back and said it's a GPS antenna. All right. I said, okay, that's very interesting. But if it's a GPS antenna, that would mean that we must have, back in 1561, GPS satellites in orbit in order for the GPS antenna on the fighter jet to work. Now, I believe that this is a B-1 bomber, okay? And I'm going to show you the next picture. And I think this is a very, very close representation of what we might be seeing here, okay? So what's going on in 1561? In April of 1561, the whole spring of 1561, well, the entire Ottoman army and navy wanted to sack Rome and end Christianity once and for all. So they were attacking Lepeto, Italy, with their naval fleet. They failed, but there's still to this day a Muslim population in Lepeto, Italy, that's been there for 500 years. And they were also coming up through Eastern Europe, through what is now Serbia and Croatia, in order to loop around and come down into the Italian peninsula and sack Rome. But when they get to a small garrison, think the ragtag bunch of Meccans that saved Mecca with the birds with stones in their mouths. When the entire Ottoman army gets to Croatia, this small garrison of soldiers kicks their butt, and they never make it to Rome, and Rome is saved till today. So, what were these B1s doing there? Because when I tried to investigate the details of this particular battle, and I wrote to universities in Serbia and Croatia and libraries, no one had an account. They said, we'll research it for you, we'll get back to you. Nobody can find any details of it, which I find astonishing. All right. Makes me wonder if the details were removed from circulation, let's say, and whether or not the small garrison in Croatia may have had technological help from the United States of America. Now, again, we all know about Basel, Switzerland, which takes place 5 years later, and the black spheres, again, they look like they're coming out of a discolored sun. But later on in the newspaper article, it mentions that the balls made clicking sounds. This would definitely rule out any sort of natural phenomenon as far as I'm concerned. Clicking, beeping, these more than likely, in my opinion, were technological objects, again, coming out of a discolored sun, possibly the portal opening up, because they're not really coming out of the sun at 93 million miles away. But it seems like they keep coming back to fight each other in various times. Now we go to New England in 1660, and a fellow by the name of James Silk Buckingham sees a phenomenon in the sky, and this is a quote. He says, it resembled the form of a spear, of which the point was directed towards the setting sun, possible portal, and which with slow, majestic motion descended through the upper atmosphere and gradually disappeared beneath the horizon. Coming in for a landing, all right, was this the return of the B-1 bomber? England, 1661, Berkshire, the orbs and the crosses and the cylinders come back, okay? And this is the newspaper article from 1661 that says there were balls of many colors, all right? Divers means many. They were black, blue, and reddish, exactly like Nuremberg, and great blocks and pieces of timber. They're the cylinders, and some in the form of crosses. So they're back again. June 11, 1716, Boston, a strange appearance of ships in the air which engaged each other for about a half an hour, when a cloud of many colors covered and prevented any further flight of them. The cloud, the rainbow. Did the portal open up again and take them back into where they came from? August 24th, 1814, the War of 1812. Okay, the British are marching on Washington, D.C., and they're determined to finish the job this time. They make it into Washington, D.C., and they burn the original White House to the ground, along with all of these other government buildings. James Madison, President Madison's wife, Dolly Madison, actually escaped with a number of portraits of George Washington. So my question here is, something incredible happened. A storm of a millennium happened that day in Washington, D.C. They call it the tornado that saved America. Such a ferocious rainstorm comes along that it puts out all of the fires, and the British have to retreat. It's that bad, and the British never again get a toehold in Washington, D.C., and lose the war. So my question is, if we've been seeing American fighter jets going back and forth throughout time, is it not possible that we were doing a little bit of weather manipulation here? some chemtrails maybe, making sure that the fires get put out so that the United States would still continue to exist until today. And just my theory. Let's move into the 1900s, actually 1890. Some of you may know this because it's making the rounds right now, but in 1890, a fellow by the name of Ingersoll Lockwood wrote a series of children's books about a little character named Baron Trump. And Baron Trump lived in Trump Castle, and he would go around on these adventures with his dog Bulger. And interestingly enough, Baron thought so highly of himself that his head was twice as big as other children's heads. But what's really, really coincidental is that Baron had a mentor in these books, and the name of his mentor is Donald. Okay. That's a really interesting coincidence. All right. It's almost as if we're living in a simulation and this guy somehow got the answers before they happened or knew what happened in the future and sending us a hint about what's coming. All right. Now, what's really interesting is the last book that this guy wrote was called 1900 or The Last President. And it's the story of Americans who are protesting a corrupt election process while the president's hometown of New York City is fearing the collapse of the republic after the transition of presidential power. And essentially, the president in this book is a populist. And at one point, there's riots on Fifth Avenue near his home. You tell me that this guy didn't know what was going on in the last couple of elections. All right. It's astounding. And there's more coincidences than just, somebody possibly knowing about Donald Trump in 1896. The Titanic sinks on April 14th, 1912. Hits an iceberg on its maiden voyage from Belfast to New York. There's not enough lifeboats, and thousands of people die. But 14 years earlier, a guy by the name of Morgan Robertson writes a book called The Wreck of the Titan. And it's the story of a luxury liner going from New York to Belfast, hitting an iceberg, not having enough lifeboats, and thousands of people die. All right. What's the final nail in the coffin about this coincidence is that he almost got the name of the Titanic right. He called it the Titan. So what happened in 2023 is this small submersible with tourists is going down to the Titanic, and boom, it implodes and everybody gets killed. All right. The name of the submersible that was going to the Titanic was the Titan. All right. So you got three coincidences in one here. Now, I go to the gym every day and I walk on a treadmill and we have a television set in front of us. And I always watch Roku TV because I like to see the old Alfred Hitchcock episodes, the old Twilight Zones, the old Outer Limits. And I came across on Roku TV another show from the 50s called Tales of Tomorrow. And in an episode from April 25th, 1952, it's the story of an alien triangle landing at a military base. And the outside of the triangle has hieroglyphics on it. And you can see the picture of how big the triangle is with the hieroglyphics at this military base in 1952. Does this remind anybody of anything? How about Rendlesham, 1980? Triangle, hieroglyphics, military base. How did the writers of this show in April 25th, 1952 manage to almost peg everything about the Roswell incident? 1968, some of us may remember there was a made-for-TV movie called Wild in the Streets. Hal Holbrook played a senator, and Christopher Jones plays this young revolutionary socialist named Max Frost. He's got a band called Max Frost and the Stormtroopers. Okay. Stormtroopers think Nazis, and he's going to run for president, and he's doesn't like older people and pretty much wants to send them to camps, essentially. So what's interesting about this is there's a song in the movie called "The Shape of Things to Come," and it talks about revolution, old new dreams crowding out old realities. There's revolution swooping in like a new breeze, and basically this is based roughly on a movie called Things to Come by H.G. Wells. And in the movie H.G. Wells, it takes place over generations, this movie. There is a massive war, and gangs take over the cities and run it until a group of New World Order people come and save the day and restore the world. H.G. Wells himself believed that in the future there would be a one world benevolent dictatorship. Okay, think World Economic Forum, the World Order, that type of thing. So to wrap this all up, to bring it all home, Max Frost in the movie is a young revolutionary who goes on to become president of the United States. In January of 2025, Max Frost was sworn in as a young Democrat Socialist congressman in Florida. I tried to find out if this guy changed his name. Maybe he saw the movie back in 1968. His parents showed it to him later on or something, but this is the guy's real name. All right. And I just find the coincidence startling. Okay. How am I doing on time, Tom?
Yeah, we're just after 4 o'clock, so you got 45, 50 minutes, 55 minutes or so.
Okay. I think I got another 15 minutes to go. So, okay. Neo's Passport, 1999, in the movie The Matrix, came out in 1999. The passport expiration date on his passport is September 11th, 2001. I found that to be an interesting coincidence. Also, something that maybe some of you don't know, I was working in New York at the time, that on September 11th, 2002, the winning lottery number in New York City was 9/11. Okay. Uh, which I said to myself, we're definitely in a simulation at that point. Now, this brings me to the next to last thing I want to talk about. And this I think is really important, the connection between Elon Musk and Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun was the Nazi scientist who invented the V2 rocket, which gave us our first modern concept of what a rocket with fins at the tail would look like. And he also went on to work for NASA and develop the Saturn V rocket. So when he was captured by the Allies, along with 120 other German scientists, they had an option: go face trial in Nuremberg and probably hang at the end of a noose, or come to the United States and work on our Cold War projects. And of course, Werner went to New Mexico, and in the 1950s, he was working on all sorts of interesting top secret projects, but he was bored. And so he wrote a novel, a very technical, boring novel. He had an idea on how to colonize Mars. Okay, so this is a V2 rocket. This is his book that he wrote in 1952. It was called Project Mars, a Technical Tale. And this is the original artwork from the book. This is a later edition, but they use the same artwork. It looks suspiciously like a V2 rocket. Okay, but this is a much larger rocket. It can hold numerous colonists. And it's going to look like something else very interesting. It's going to look like a starship by Elon Musk, who coincidentally wants to colonize Mars. The starship here can hold 200 colonists. Okay, so we see our first connection between Werner and Elon. But the second interesting thing about this book is that it's either chapter 23 or 28, Werner von Braun discusses the how the government of Mars will function. It'll have a leader and it'll have two chambers of Congress, sort of like the United States. But interestingly enough, the name of the leader of the colony, his title is the Elon. This is from the original manuscript in German. So the head of the colony of Mars in Werner von Braun's book will be called the Elon. And now today we have Elon Musk trying to colonize Mars with a starship that looks like the original drawing from Werner von Braun's 1952 novel. But it gets weirder. Okay. When von Braun retired he from NASA in 1970, I believe it was, he goes to work for a private sort of aerospace, military aerospace corporation. Now, Star Wars is coming. Okay, when Ronald Reagan uh, institutes the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars. Werner von Braun was there with Oppenheimer at the beginning of it. Oppenheimer who made the H bomb, and he had a secretary working for him, Dr. Carol Rosen, and Dr. Carol Rosen used to go on speaking engagements. Stephen Greer used to have her. And she claims that von Braun told her that what's going on in space is all about the weaponization of space. Whoever controls space controls the world. Okay. So he told her that it would come in steps. First, there would be space based weapons platforms. And we see that today. It's a little out of sync from his 6 points, but we have the X-37 in orbit right now. China's got one in orbit. China's got their satellites dogfighting with each other. Russia has a nuke allegedly in space that's following other satellites around. So we definitely see space-based weapons platforms coming true. Terrorist attacks, think, 9/11 and all of the other terrorist attacks that we've seen over the past 25 years. Uh, there will be rogue nations with nuke ambitions, think North Korea and Iran. He said that humans will be connected by a type of Neuralink. Now, whether he was talking about the internet or whether he was talking about Elon Musk putting brain chips in people, I don't know. Number five is saving Earth from asteroids. These are all ruses in order to weaponize space. So last year, we shot a projectile into an asteroid to see if we could change its trajectory in case we ever had to do that with one heading towards Earth, like a Apophis. But is that all a ruse just to test different types of space weapons? All right. It's interesting that Donald Trump created Space Force in his first term. All right. But the final nail in the coffin, Werner von Braun says, is that there will be a fake alien invasion. Okay. So is she lying? Is she telling the truth? Let's look at some stuff. Okay, this is a Starlink satellite, a fully deployed Starlink satellite. Okay, that's a solar array on top, the actual satellites at the bottom of the screen. Elon Musk wants to put 60,000 of these around the Earth, supposedly for internet. Okay, but in October of last year, Elon Musk signed a contract for Space Shield, which will be a sort of satellite killing satellite system. Okay. And I wonder if we already have our version of it up in the sky and we're just telling people that it's only for internet. And I'll tell you why. Look at this Starlink. Look at this. This is a 1981 concept drawing of a satellite that was part of what was going to be called Operation Brilliant Pebbles. And Oppenheimer decided that we would not have the technology to do this until the first quarter of the 21st century. In other words, now. So they scrapped it. But this was going to be a satellite killing satellite network. Okay. Starlink, Operation Brilliant Pebbles. This is what the 1981 concept map for the Brilliant Pebbles satellite coverage network would be. This is the Starlink coverage map. All right. I believe that Starlink is a weapon. Okay. Now, a couple of years ago, we started getting reports of large mile-long UFOs, all right, in the sky. This was taken by a pilot on his way to Vancouver from Hawaii. And again, Greg Sisko from MUFON, photo analyst, stacked the video and was able to clarify that it's actually looks like two different objects here. On the left, you see a small square, a little bit of a space, and then what looks like a long cylinder. What you're actually looking at is a Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX, Elon Musk, releasing a satellite train of 60 Starlink satellites. And the point I want to make here is that the first Starlink satellite launch was in May of 2019. However, uh, look at this picture. You see the short yellow on the right, a space, and a long yellow. A pilot flying over the English Channel in 2007 apparently saw two of these things. And I had to wonder, are we looking at a possible Starlink launch, you know, years before, 12 years before the first Starlinks were actually launched? So were we doing this for a longer period of time than we let on? When we talk about like F-117 fighter jets, they were flying around 15 years before it was made public. All right. So were we creating a network this far back in 2007? Well, I think we were doing it even earlier in 1998. And we get this a lot till today. People think they see these long spaceship cylinders with portholes when actually they're looking at Starlinks moving across the sky. Now, what are those little stars floating around? If this isn't really a cylinder, but actually the little circles are individual Starlink satellites, what are these stars floating around? Well, when the Falcon 9 achieves escape velocity at 17,000 miles per hour, and it starts releasing the skyline, the Starlink train, all right, these little anchors pop off the Falcon 9 to release the Starlink satellites. So these little anchors start floating around, and because the sun's rays within the first 2 hours after sunset will illuminate anything that's metallic from the reflection of the sun off them, everything's moving at 17,000 miles per hour. So people think they're seeing a mothership with little satellite objects around it. What they're seeing are Starlink trains and the little anchors that broke off the Falcon 9 to allow the Starlinks to be released. This is 1998 Canada. But in 1958, near Offutt Sac Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, there was this encounter from a NICAP publication in the 1960s that some high-level military officers at this nuclear Air Force base, Strategic Air Command, saw what looks like a cylinder with little satellites floating around it. And because it was right after sunset, more than likely this was something in space that they were looking at. The trajectory is different than the way you would see a Starlink train going across the sky. So I can't answer that question, but I definitely believe that there was something in space in 1958. And I'll give you a little bit more proof that something weird was going on. In 1958, the only thing in the sky was Sputnik. Okay. However, in Project Aquarius, MUFON's Project Aquarius digital library, we have the Captain Ruppelt Blue Book files when he was in charge of Blue Book. And in 1956, he wrote a letter to Dr. Lincoln LaPaz. Now, Lincoln LaPaz was the guy that made the catalog of all those green fireball sightings in the 1940s, late 1940s over Los Alamos and stuff. You can actually get that fireball catalog off the internet. It's still around in Excel form. So he writes to Lincoln LaPaz and says, you know, I heard from Dr. Clyde Tombaugh, the astronomer that discovered Pluto, that there are actually two satellites orbiting Earth, one at 400 miles up and one at 600 miles up. His daughter writes back to him and basically tells him, hey, butt off. Look at the second paragraph. I've been asked to inform you that the story published in Aviation Week was entirely without foundation insofar as reference to Dr. LaPaz was concerned. So there's a little nugget there. She's telling Ruppelt, Lincoln LaPaz shouldn't have been involved with that story, and Aviation Week actually recanted that they got the information from Lincoln LaPaz. But she says, insofar as reference to Dr. LaPaz was concerned, in other words, she was throwing Ruppelt a clue that maybe the story was true, but that Lincoln LaPaz had nothing to do with it. If so, what were the two satellites in the sky in 1956? And if we had satellites in the sky in 1956, why couldn't we have GPS satellites over Nuremberg, Germany in 1561? In the 1990s, a guy by the name of Serge Monast wrote a book that laid out something very similar to what Werner von Braun's secretary, Carol Rosen, was talking about. And Serge Monast suffered greatly because of writing this book called Project Bluebeam, which I think you've all heard of. His children were taken away from him by the Canadian government. He lost his job, and then he died mysteriously along with one of his co-researchers within months of each other of a heart attack, and he was a young man. But his book, Bluebeam, talks about how history will be rewritten. There will be a fake savior. We will see mind control. Again, think internet or Neuralink. And again, like Carol Rosen, a fake alien invasion. So I don't think that Serge had a clue that Werner von Braun was thinking the same thing. So it's very curious to me how he came up with similar ideas. So the question is, how could you pull off a fake alien invasion? There's a picture of Hillary Clinton a while back. She's carrying a book under her arm about UFOs. And in that book, it actually talks about how they would do a fake alien invasion by using the upper atmosphere as a projection screen. How would you do that? Well, if you had 60,000 Starlink internet weapon systems slash projectors, you could show anything you want up in the sky like a movie. And we already see that there's holograms in these rich Middle Eastern countries, like in Abu Dhabi, where you can almost touch what looks like a hologram in the sky of whatever you want. So I think that it's technically possible to pull it off. And I'll give you an example. Back in World War One, the British and the French and the Germans were fighting trench warfare. And one particular night, both armies see a vision of the Virgin Mary up in the sky, and they're fighting. So the question is, was it really an apparition, a Marian apparition of the Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus, or was it a projection? Was it an experiment, again, back in time, not in our time, just to see if they could pull it off? Okay, and they did. So I'm going to leave you with this. This is one of my favorite things to investigate. The Great Pyramid of Giza, according to some people all over Facebook and UFO groups, say that the Great Pyramid of Giza lies at a latitude equating the speed of light in meters per second. So the question is that true? And the answer is, yeah, pretty much, very close. Okay, the latitude is 29.9792458 north. All right, and the speed of light is 299.792.458 meters per second. So that's really, really, really close. But there's two problems. Okay, first is that the Pyramid of Giza may be at that latitude. That's the speed of light in meters per second. But so were literally millions or billions of other places on Earth. All right. Austin, Texas is at that same latitude, for example. So is it just a coincidence? And according to Snopes, it is. And the reason Snopes gives is the second reason is that the metric system wasn't invented until 1795 at the end of the 18th century. The Egyptians used a different measuring system. They used rods and stuff like that. So is it a coincidence? And I said, well, yeah, that makes sense. All right. But then after reading over 3 or 4 years, hundreds of posts and thousands of comments from people, I realized that nobody asked a very specific, obvious question. And that question is, Well, what about the longitude? All right. Nobody ever talked about the longitude. So I looked up the longitude of the Great Pyramid of Giza. All right. And it turns out that it's really pretty close to pi, 3.14, but not exactly. The longitude of the Pyramid of Giza is within a mile of what the ancient Persians used as their measurement of pi, 3.127. So pretty close, but not quite. Now look at this one. The Great Pyramid has 36 more feet to go before it hits precisely the speed of light meters. But it's going to take another 2,000 years as the continent of Africa moves northeast. All right. So is the Great Pyramid of Giza a countdown clock? That's one of my theories. Now, let's look at this graph. On the left is the Giza necropolis, pretty much maybe where you see Makati Pyramids Hotel is probably where the ancient Persian version of Pi lands. So it's pretty close. So if they had built the pyramids 17 miles to the east at El Katameya, they would have had it perfectly lined up with modern pi 3.14. But there's a very specific reason why they didn't do that, and that's because the pyramids and the west side of the Nile represent death and the afterlife. So there was a specific superstitious reason why they built it where it was. But I absolutely believe they intended to build it on the latitude for the speed of light meters per second at the longitude of pi. But again, hey, the metric system wasn't invented until 1795. But after everything I've shown you today, all right, is it not possible that wasn't aliens, that it was us from the future, went back, helped the ancient Egyptians, and basically that mathematical marvel, the Great Pyramid of Giza, is a postcard to us saying, hello, we're here already. Okay. So that's it. That's my theories, and I'm sticking to them.
Cool. So open up the chat. If you got questions for Bob, drop something in the chat and I will or raise your hand. Christine's raising her hand. I will unmute Christine if she wants to talk to Bob directly. Asking Christine to unmute. And Christine put her hand down, or maybe she was clapping.
Oh,
So if you've got questions, or raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can talk to Bob directly.
oh, Bill K says Clyde Tombaugh was a MUFON member. I did not know that. There were a lot of interesting MUFON members. All right, when we did the Project Aquarius is the digitization of all of this historical material that MUFON collected over like 25, 30 years and scanned it. The old symposium proceedings, the Ruppelt collection, the Stringfield diaries,
Yeah, yeah.
all of the journals. We have all of the journals online now. And if you go back and look at the symposium proceedings, some of the people that they had speak were incredible. And some of the people who were actually board members, famous and infamous in the UFO community, like Bill Moore, Linda Moulton Howe was a board member. I was astonished when I saw who all of the board members were in the past.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we have one of our newest field investigators has a question for you. Mark Truffle just got his field investigation certification. He'd like to ask you a question, Bob. Go ahead, Mark.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thing about the Egypt thing and the Great Pyramid. Um, okay, two things. One, longitude is relative to a point on Earth, like Paris or Greenwich, England.
Right.
So, where were you assuming that that was the starting point at that time?
I just wanted to see if it matched up. And what I did was I looked to see the antipode where the same latitude and the same longitude would match up on the other side of the earth, and it's pretty much in the middle of the Pacific Ocean off Chile. So the only possible match was where the pyramids were built. Also, the pyramids are built precisely at the center of all of the land mass on earth, which is another interesting coincidence.
Okay, and now what does the meter have to do with latitude? Because you're talking degrees, not meters.
Yeah, it's just the coincidence is in the number itself. Okay.
Well, no, the numbers have nothing to do with it. One's an angle, one's a unit of length.
Okay. Well, you're going to get too mathematical on me. I was just giving you a visual
No, 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 no,
representation.
no. If you, the thing is that we're assuming there's 360 degrees in a circle, right?
Hmm.
If you want to go for latitude, you're talking from the equator up to that point. Okay, that's your angle of latitude. So that's based on looking at the North Star or whatever was at that time, and that moved around. If you've ever been to that part of to Egypt, to Luxor or whatever, you see how like they watched the Earth move over time, where they actually rotated their temples down there to compensate for that. So they knew where north was.
Right.
So if you look at the angle down for the latitude, yeah, they would have had that figured out pretty exactly close. So it doesn't surprise me if they had decided to put it at a specific latitude. However, it's probably not. I don't know how they would have known anything about speed of light. That you would have required some very fancy optics and lasers and things like that.
But my argument is, what if they had help from the future? All right, and that's the thing. And also the shaft, when they built the pyramids, the shaft, the main shaft, lined up with the North Star. So I know what you're talking about. It's
Which
moved.
shaft are you talking about?
The main one goes from the secret chamber up.
No, I've been in the Great Pyramid, and you can't see through that shaft.
Right.
I tried. You can't. It's closed off. If you, in the Great, I have a picture of me laying in the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid. It smells like urine. I hate to tell you,
Yeah, I've
but
been in there too.
what's more fascinating is that rock is the way the angles and the flatness of it, the way it was carved. However, yeah, I tried looking through those shafts, and you can't see anything.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got Joe Swenson's got a question too. I'm gonna ask Joe to unmute if Joe wants to ask his question or comment.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to know any more about some of the remote viewing projects of the 80s and 2083 and 2003. But in 72 to 82, I was trained as a remote viewer with the Montauk Project. And I was with a remote viewer, not Montauk, but at that time it was the Gateway Experience. And then it was the Montauk Project afterwards. And we were dealing with changing timelines. So when the project ran again in 2003, I was very aware of what they were looking for. And I can talk to you about that offline if you want to. It's
Yeah,
not
that
really
sounds
that
that's
interesting to others.
it's very interesting to me. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Cool. More questions or comments for Bob?
I just
Oh, Carol's got her hand up. Let me ask Carol to unmute.
and Lou also has his hand up.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yep. All right, Carol first.
Yes, hi. That was really interesting, and I do have one large question. So, in your opinion, what is the overarching reason for time manipulation?
Okay, I didn't mention that because I don't like to get into religion too much. You're right.
Okay.
But to me, it seems like the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians are going at it. All right, and that there's an end game. All right. Another interesting thing is that I was always perplexed by this. If Jesus Christ comes back and has 1,000-year millennium reign, why does he let the devil out a little bit at the end of the 1,000 years? Never made sense to me. But I always said, if I was the devil and I got free, knowing that at Armageddon I'm going to go to hell forever, what am I going to do? I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to look for the smartest, most evil people, and I'm going to build myself a time machine and try to go back and change history so that the Christ would never come. All right, that's just some of the stuff I got going on in my head. But I think it's definitely got a religious angle to what's going on.
Interesting. So just a follow up to that, Earth is just one tiny speck in the universe. Again, theoretically, could something like this be going on universally or in other places?
Yeah, not only universally in space, but possibly like if we live in a multiverse,
Yeah.
Like it where every particle would have to have, you know, all of the possibilities of what that particle could do. Let's say you saved the day on 9/11 from the plane hitting. Well, then what does the timeline bifurcate? And does one timeline always have the 9/11 World Trade Centers falling, and another timeline where it doesn't fall? It's you know, I mean, the
Yeah,
possibilities are like with quantum mechanics are endless.
that's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you said Lou had his hand up, so I want to ask Lou
Yep.
to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can
Yep.
hear you.
Yeah, one thing that's always puzzled me is that the Werner von Braun technology and the Bob Lazar technology just seem to be at opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, Werner von Braun is rockets, and Elon Musk is using rockets. And Bob Lazar claims we've got anti-gravity technology. Now, um, News Nation has occasionally some programs on. Some of them I trust and some of them I don't. But anyway, just a couple of days ago, there was a blurb on News Nation that NASA, somebody in NASA has admitted they know that there are objects flying around. They have absolutely no idea what they are. Now, I don't really believe that. What do you think?
I think that there's objects flying around that they know what they are, and I think there's objects flying around that they don't know what they are. I think there's both. One of the big things with the News Nation thing with Jake Barber, with that video that they showed, that night vision of the egg being retrieved. Personally, I don't believe that video. I think that was a staged video. However, I can tell you that these psionic and secret weapon takedowns of UFOs, it's most likely real, and that it's not something new that Jake Barber was involved in, but that's been going on probably since the 50s, and we're going to try to prove that with some examples at the MUFON Symposium in July. We have information that we found in the Project Aquarius Digital Library that's very, very interesting about retrievals of crashes that I don't think anybody's ever seen before, because it's been there, buried, but you know, public, but no one knew where to look for it until we put the Project Aquarius library together. So I definitely think there's things flying around that we don't know what they are, and there's things flying around that we do know what they are. And I'll give you one more example. Last year at the MUFON Symposium, we were able to smuggle a piece of material out of Russia. It was subsequently robbed after we tested it, but we were able to smuggle a second piece out. And it turned out that it's an aerogel, and that it was used in some sort of spacecraft. And aerogel is used in the aerospace industry. It's one of the lightest materials ever made by man, and there is a technology where a tic tac shaped object would be using aerogel in a certain capacity. The sample we had, the second sample, we actually sent to a very sophisticated laboratory in Australia. They did $20,000 worth of testing for us, and they were able to describe that it had a carbon-60 fullerene buckyball molecular structure necessary for aerospace, and that the sample was mildly radioactive, showing that it was in space at one time. The problem was they could not identify in their industrial database the process by which this material was manufactured, nor could they find a manufacturer. So to me, that suggests either A, it's from a secret aerospace laboratory, possibly in Russia, and this guy was able to smuggle this stuff out to us, and it's from the aerospace industry, or B, goes back to what my presentation was about today, that the manufacturer and the manufacturing process has not been invented yet, and therefore this guy may have come across something that's from the future. If you ever read the Michael Crichton book or saw the movie Sphere, it talks about it's Dustin Hoffman and Samuel L. Jackson as scientists. They go down to the bottom of the ocean and they find an alien craft there, and inside the alien craft is an American aerospace vehicle. The problem is that the aerospace vehicle was built 300 years in the future. So I tend to think if I was going to line up my theories about what's going on one by one, I'd say time travel is first, aliens second, interdimensionals third, and I can tell you some interesting stuff on that too. Demons fourth, secret aircraft fifth, natural phenomena sixth, in that order. That's the way I look at it.
Well, if we've got anti-gravity technology, why are we fooling around with rockets?
Well, there's a group of people who believe that we already have bases on the moon, we already have bases on Mars, all right, and that NASA is just a big publicity stunt to keep the public happy. But if you go back to the guy Ben Rich, who was the head of Skunk Works at Area 51 before he died of cancer, he said that we already have the technology to bring ET home. We have the technology to go to the stars, but it's locked up in black budgets so deep that the American public will never know. So is NASA just a big publicity stunt, and we're decades ahead of the game?
Well, I was going to say, I'll throw one out. I heard something recently about different approximations of numbers of ETs that are actually living beneath our planet or beneath the surface of our planet. Any thoughts on that or what that may be about? You kind of
Oh yeah, there's I guess it was around 1999, right? It started the internet. I don't know if you know who Milton William Cooper is. Bill Cooper. He wrote the book Behold the Pale Horse. Okay. He was sort of a strange guy. He apparently was an intelligence officer in the Navy. He was on the USS Tyru when they had that they filmed that object, that massive cylinder coming out of the water. But later on, he got deep into ufology. He ended up getting shot to death by, I believe, federal marshals a couple of years after 2000. And he had some outlandish ideas, but he claimed that these aliens, these visitors, that they have bases throughout the entire United States underground. And I believe that that's absolutely possible. There was that guy, I forget his name now, he got killed mysteriously again, who claimed that there was a shootout between aliens and U.S. service members under what's it, Dulce base
Oh yeah,
in
yep.
Mexico. Yeah, and there was actually a MUFON witness who had a report in New Jersey, and when I contacted him about the case, I got into a long conversation with him, and he was an architect, and he told me that everything's compartmentalized. He got a contract to build an underground room in New Mexico that was on springs, supposedly to withstand an earthquake or a nuclear explosion hit. And he said that they have vast amounts of space under the desert in the Southwest, like almost like cities down there. Military, American military, possibly working with one type of alien. So I don't know. I've read that. I've seen the documents, but I don't know if it's actually true or not. But I think it's definitely plausible.
Yeah, and because that also the thing had said something about the whole Earth is like underneath is like a honeycomb. But as you're saying that under the desert, it also makes you think of the controversies around or the mysteries around the Denver airport. Do you have any thoughts on the Denver airport?
No, I know that there's all sorts of stuff under the Denver airport, but I don't know what's going on with that. I never researched that.
Okay, we have Bill Konkoleski's got his hand up. Let's see what Bill has to say. I'm going to ask Bill to unmute.
Oh, I accidentally went off the screen. Okay. Thanks, Bob, for a great talk. On writing on what Tom had just said with regards to species living under the surface, either ground or water or whatever, I always found it a very difficult question to answer whenever somebody asks me, if there's a superior species, why are they the ones that are hiding? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
That's an interesting question. I have other thoughts, like with the grays. It seems like there's two types of grays to me. Like there's the kind that we bring down in a crash and we get their dead bodies. And then there's this other type of gray that don't seem to need spaceships and always appear in threes in people's bedrooms and escort people out to a spaceship for experimentation. And there's two different phenomena. And also from the MUFON reports that I've seen over the years, and I've read a lot of MUFON reports, that it seems to me the two primary types of aliens that people encounter with our experiencer resource team are full-blown Nordics and little grays. Probably little grays more than Nordics, and then you'd have the reptilians after that. And there's the little guys in the hoods. There's a whole bunch of, but it depends on what they're doing here. If we possibly are working with them, they can't tell the public. You know, is there some sort of cosmic war going on? Are they trying to help us? I mean, there could be lots of reasons why. You know, did they really make an agreement with Eisenhower that they'll give us technology if we let them abduct people, in which case they wouldn't want anybody to know why they're here? You know, are they benevolent? Are they malevolent? I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways you could go with that, but or maybe we don't want the public to know. Our governments don't want the public to know. You know, then you get into the whole Stephen Greer free energy thing. It would destroy industry, and you know. So I definitely think that there's logical reasons why they may not present themselves.
Thanks.
Cool. Anything? Oh, yeah. Anything else? Anyone else got any questions?
It looks like
Bill's. Yep. Let me asking Bill Auden to unmute himself. Oh, I want to ask you again, Bill.
Yeah. Okay. There's been several pictures and articles, and I haven't read them yet, on the new bomber that they just come out with. That's got an anti-gravity thing on the bomber. It don't make the gravity go away completely, but it takes away like 80% or something like that. Mm-hmm. So the thing becomes a lot lighter and can fly higher and use less energy.
And hover. Right. I'll tell you. Yeah, let me tell you something. Maybe 3 years ago. Oh, well, I guess it was last year they came out with that new B-1 Spirit bomber or whatever, fighter jet. I forget what it is. It's like it's similar to like the F-117. It's pure white. All right. It's got two little triangle cockpit windows. And they just officially flew it for the first time last year. MUFON were getting reports over the last 3 or 4 years of pretty much drawings head on of what looked like something like this, and it had two triangle windows, and we were getting a lot of drawings of this. And apparently when they released the official photograph of this new fighter jet, this stealth fighter jet, it was white, it had the triangle windows, and it sort of had the flare to the wings looking at it head on. And we started to realize that people must have been seeing this thing flying around on test runs. But what was very, very interesting about it, and which I didn't know about the anti-gravity part of it till you just mentioned this, is that in all of the reports, the person said that this object was hovering. Okay, so unless it's some sort of VTOL aircraft, you know, and they're damping the engine somehow so that you don't hear the roar like with a Harrier jet, it made me wonder, are these new fighter jets using some sort of anti-gravity technology where they can just stand still silently in the air? Okay, and now when you tell me that they had some sort of anti-gravity device on them, that makes it more plausible what these people were reporting to the MUFON database. And apparently we've been working on anti-gravity technology for more than half a century, if I recall correctly. So I think did Bill McNeff have his hand up before?
I don't know, but
yes. My question is, or my thought, it was asked, why would aliens be living underground? And my answer would be for safety. You're protected from exploding stars as well as all kinds of weapons. Now, of course, if there's an alien who has the capability of traveling through solid rock, then that's another question. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, you know, what's his name? Bigelow? Bigelow says that they're walking around us right now. We just don't recognize that they're aliens. I believe that's possible too. You know,
Oh yes.
that
Oh yes.
Yeah, I hate to. I'll just throw this out, Bob. I don't know if it was the last. No, it wasn't the last symposium. Probably a couple symposiums ago. I did see someone walk by in the kind of the entryway of the area, and she didn't look quite human to me. We kind of looked at each other, and I just kind of tried to admit this feeling of peace, and
uh,
she just walked on, and I never saw her the rest of the symposium. So I just, yeah, it made me wonder, was this someone who was human or someone who just looked very close to human but really wasn't? So
yeah, I've heard people mention that before too. I've never seen any possible aliens at MUFON symposiums, although I have been told that we had last year several NSA agents or whatever
mm,
observing our materials presentation. So that I thought that was interesting.
yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me. Okay, oh, is it Bill Odden? Are you raising your hand again? I think Bill Odden's raising his hand again. So I'm gonna ask Bill to unmute.
The and these aliens living underneath the water and stuff, they've been doing that forever. And one of the things they would to me be very afraid of because of their electronics is EMPs from the sun, unless they monitor that all the time. But if they're under there, they're safe. Nothing bothers them. And this is back, even when Columbus discovered America, he mentioned it coming out of the water. And
Oh,
there was no reason for him to hide from anybody two or 10,000 years ago, but they've been doing it forever.
yeah, and now because of like when the Malaysia Airlines flight disappeared 10 years ago, whatever, it's like they've been mapping the oceans relentlessly now. So if there is some sort of Silurian civilization hiding at the bottom of the ocean, I think they're running out of time before they'll be found out by us because of all of the ocean mapping we're doing right now.
The what do you call it? I don't know how far down they go, but the ones that live down by Area 51, what's his name wrote about that he got to know so well. Anyways, they had one of their little kids that were living at that base near 51 break a leg, and it would not heal on this planet. They thought the planet, our planet is atmosphere and everything is just horrid. And they had to ship them back to the home world, have them heal, and then ship them back here again. So an awful lot of those ETs do not like this place. They come here, visit, pick up food, and they're gone.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Bill. Okay, Bob Schultz.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear
I
you.
can.
Okay, I was trying to unmute, but it says the host has you muted. And so now I'm unmuted. Okay, I wanted to answer a question I think that Bill Oden was referring to. I think you're referring to the B-2 bomber. The B-2 bomber uses gravity assist for thrust. And so pilots in the past have said, well, we take off with normal jets, but then when we get up real high, close to 100,000 feet, we turn on the magic. And the magic is they can throttle back the jets and ride on gravity assist for thrust, just like a surfboarder rides on the wave of an ocean. This rides off of a gravity wave generated by the high voltage on the plane's leading edge versus the trailing edge. Does that answer your question, Bill Orden?
Yeah, but it showed a picture of this plane, and it had a thing underneath the belly that was part of the plane that was so big. And they couldn't. They called it a bomber, but how would they carry a bomb? Because this thing would cover the whole bottom of the plane. But that was their thing. But yeah, that they use that even on fighter planes. They use that thing to keep the air, separate the air before the plane gets there.
Well, the B-2 bomber can carry the largest bomb. It's called a bunker buster bomb, and
Yeah.
it can go halfway around the world drop those things and then come back to its base. It's only based one place in Missouri. I can't remember the name of the base, but you can do Google Earth and you can zoom in and see a B-2 bomber sitting on the tarmac there. And and the Air Force requirement was to have a bomber that can go halfway around the world and back again without refueling. And that's what the B-2 bomber does by gravity assist for thrust.
Wow.
That's all I have.
Wow. You know, I looked up while you were talking there, when I was telling you about the thing that the MUFON witnesses were drawing. It was the B-21 Raider, and its maiden launch, its maiden flight was November of 2023. But apparently we were seeing, MUFON witnesses were seeing this thing flying around and hovering before November of 2023. So it was the B-21 Raider that I was referring to.
And actually, Bob Schultz, I believe he had some experience with that big power outage out on the East Coast of New York too, didn't you, Bob?
Well, if you go to the Northland MUFON website and look up the videos there, you'll find one that says Blackout 1965, where they had this big blackout all over New England. Is that what you're referring to, Tom?
Yeah, I think Bob had mentioned it earlier, didn't you, Bob?
Yeah, when I was 6 years old, I lived in Jersey City, right across the Hudson River from Manhattan. And it was the strangest thing because we could see the New York skyline, the Empire State Building. And it was November 9th, 1965, that the blackout went from Quebec down to Virginia, I believe. And to see New York City as a silhouette with no lights, it was the weirdest thing I ever saw when I was a little kid. So yeah, it was November 9th, 65.
Well, if you look at that video or play that video, you'll find out that I was abducted on that date and
Really?
taken aboard the ship. You'll have to watch the video.
Okay. Wow.
I was working at Grumman Aircraft on Long Island at the time of the blackout.
Uh-huh.
That's why I was out there.
So one more reason to visit northlandmufon.com. If you needed another
Yeah.
one, there's a good one. So get out there to northlandmufon.com and check out all the videos that Jer has out there. So, okay, we're looking at 4:55. It's time to wrap it up. I don't see any other hands up. I think we're in good shape. So everybody, I'm going to try to see if I can ask everybody to unmute because we want to give Bob a big round of applause. I'm asking all to unmute. So let's give Bob a big round of applause for that presentation. I know I really enjoyed it. I think everybody did too. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jared,
you.
for asking me. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Yep.